Welcome back. We continue now with more news. In fact, keeping the conversation going, we're shining a spotlight on this next story. XA Global Trade Advisors is accusing the International Trade Administration Commission of South Africa of withholding details of a ransomware attack until last week. So ITAC was hit by a cyber attack in January. Importers and exporters are livid about the security compromise and the amount of time that it took the ITAC to in fact disclose the attack. The ITAC is an institution dedicated to promoting fair trade in South Africa in order to enhance economic growth and development at large. So this attack locked employees out of its system, whilst personal information of exporters, importers and service providers was accessed. To take this discussion further, XA Global Trade Advisors CEO Donald MacKay is going to be joining us virtually to elaborate a little bit further on this matter. Donald, good morning. Thank you for joining us at this hour.
Good morning.
It's just to say that we obviously did invite the ITAC as well, but they were not available to be part of this chat. So let's take this discussion further between the two of us. You say that clients are alarmed about the security compromise and the amount of time that it actually took ITAC to reveal what happened. How bad is the situation?
Well, part of the problem is we don't really know how bad it is. So ITAC is not sure how much data was compromised. We're on our side, for example, and I would assume other advisors are doing something similar, are putting together a list of all of our cases, all of our clients, and everything we can think of for the last 5 or so years, so that we can get feedback on exactly which bits of data were compromised. But it is serious. I don't know why it took so long for ITAC to notify the market. And of course, in that intervening period, still more data has gone into ITAC without people having an understanding that there may be a compromise. So I simply don't know how bad the situation is, except for what they've put out in their press release. But certainly our clients are quite concerned.
Donald, it's important that adequate mapping is done, and also a comprehensive tree of dependencies is noted that obviously covers systems, suppliers, and that pertinent information. So talk to us at this point about the implications of such a data breach.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most immediate concern would be that confidential data which was submitted to ITAC under certain protections of the International Trade Administration Act could end up in the public domain. So companies, when responding, for example, or bringing an anti-dumping application, supply an enormous amount of very confidential information, which would clearly be harmful if it popped up in the hands of a competitor. So I think in the short term, that is probably the single biggest concern. And the second one is, the need for an assurance that ongoing information that is submitted is going to be properly safeguarded. So we don't have an answer yet to what will be done to ensure that data submitted from this point forward is not placed at risk as well.
Because you're also trying to ascertain whether the criminals gained access to sensitive information of the firms and the individuals that reside in the ITAC infrastructure. And these are some of the questions that still linger. And just on the back of that, given how long ITAC then took to notify companies who were potentially impacted, I mean, how are importers and exporters responding? Given ITAC's response, has it instilled enough confidence back into them?
Yes, I think, to be honest with you, it's simply too early to tell. There's a continuous process of more data going into ITAC all the time. We'll have to see how that flow is potentially impeded. I mean, I hope it isn't. And I'm quite sure ITAC are working feverishly to sort the problem out. But the problem is, because nobody knows the scale of the problem, it becomes very difficult to understand what the options are. So we really are awaiting ITAC to come back to us, this kind of the royal us here, and tell us, how this is being dealt with going forward. So, my biggest concern is what happens if companies lose faith in the process and don't want to submit data. That would effectively mean that South Africa loses access to a very important set of trade policy instruments. So that is my biggest concern, is that if the response is not adequate, that companies then simply refuse to engage.
ITAC has said that it delayed disclosing this information to avoid unnecessary panic among stakeholders. From your vantage point, what's your reaction to that? And if we're going to be looking at the ransomware landscape at large, why ransomware attacks, are so successful at this juncture? I mean, where are those gaps that we're missing from your vantage point?
Yeah, so that I have absolutely no idea how the system was compromised. I mean, I have good reason to think ITAC take due care in securing their system. So I have no reason to think they were sloppy or anything like that. So I don't know how the compromise occurred. In terms of the delay, I find it a little bewildering. I simply don't know why. I'm not sure that delaying the notice in any way reduces the panic, and probably simply adds to the concern that why did it take so long to tell us that our data was potentially compromised. So I don't know why the delay is there. Only ITAC can answer. And technically, I have no idea how the system was compromised.
To Donald, on the back of that, are the attackers known? Have they made any other demands to ITAC? Do we know any of this information? Do we know, whether they've had to deal with similar cases?
To the best of my knowledge, they haven't, but that is a question only ITAC can answer. We have no idea. We don't know if the ransom was paid, was not paid. We have absolutely no idea at all what happened. And what the ongoing status is. The only thing we have is the press release that they've put out.
And so where to from here? As XA Global advisors, I mean, what are you seeking in terms of engagements, in terms of measures, protocols, and just mapping out the problem, getting to the crux of the matter, understanding really what happened? What are you seeking? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think, the biggest issue to me is we can't afford a situation at all where businesses lose faith in the system and refuse to engage with it. So if that were to happen, that would be really bad indeed. And, my biggest issue at the moment is what assurances will ITAC put forward that they have a grip on this? How long will it take for us to understand the extent of the harm caused to our clients? And hopefully it's not material. And most importantly, I guess, what will be done to ensure that such a breach doesn't happen in future? And now that all of this is out in the open, it becomes incredibly important for ITAC to respond swiftly to this. So we can't have another few weeks pass before we've got a clear plan of action on how they will deal with it. Otherwise, I fear we will have companies simply refusing to engage, and that would be very bad indeed.
And as you mentioned, it's rather tricky to take this conversation further because there's so many lingering questions. We're still trying to ascertain the extent of the problem. And beyond that press release, obviously, more questions than answers at this point. But Donald, I'll leave the conversation there for now. Thank you for joining us at the hour and for weighing in. Donald MacKay, XA Global Trade Advisors CEO, speaking to us about ITAC that has been hit by a cyber attack. Some questions about why they decided to notify importers and exporters about their data breach. Taking some time, in fact, to let them know. Questions about the extent, the harm that had been incurred on importers and exporters as well, and how they'll mitigate against this issue for the future.